Hi all, this is Simona Rich, and in this video I'm going to share with you my research on the phenomena of Kundalini. Since it happened to me, I want to know more about this energy. So at first it was really scary when the crown chakra opened and I completely misunderstood the experience, and my Catholic conditioning kicked in and I totally demonized Hinduism. But actually what happened was that I misunderstood what happened to me because I was not fully knowledgeable of this phenomena, and the cleansing period, this darkness that I had to go through to face the inner demons and outer demons, I thought this to be a deception, that I was deceived by evil spirits and so forth. But actually I read in a few days many books on Kundalini, and what I realized that what I went through is very common and different people interpret it in different ways. Those who were not born in Christianity, who were not conditioned to be afraid of the darkness or of the unknown, they basically, when they experienced that, the darkness, like seeing demons or just seeing the reality not in a way that normal people do, they started doing research, and they were able to successfully finish that period. And everyone would have to go through those periods of darkness, whether they know about them or not. But if you research what they are, it will be much easier for you. Rather than being frightened, you will know that this is just a normal thing. So in this video I will share with you my research. I will quote, probably I will make a series of videos because I have many highlighted quotes from the 4 books that I read, and I want to share this with you so that you're also familiar with this. And so if you would have to go through this experience, you would be more prepared. And if you just want to know what this energy is, then again you should watch this video, as I'm going to share many interesting points about this experience. And by far the favorite book is that I read so far is written by Gopi Krishna, and it's called Kundalini, Path to Higher Consciousness. And he experienced this awakening in a similar way to my own, completely unprepared for this, totally frightened. And then when this happened to him, he totally rejected everything about Hinduism and all religions. He was just so upset at this deception. And then later, when the benefits started coming, he realized that he made wrong conclusions about this experience. So it's very similar to my own experience. But at first of all, I would like to share with you the book that is called Kundalini Rising, Exploring the Energy of Awakening by Gurmukh Kaur Khalsa and Shivananda Radha. And this book is a collection of essays from PhDs, what PhDs think about this experience. So this is a good reading for those who want more scientific insight and more medical insight into this phenomena. So I'm going to read out my highlighted paragraphs, and I will sometimes comment on them as well. While Kundalini is most often associated with a snake, the term itself is Sanskrit for that which is coiled. So in Sanskrit, it doesn't really mean a snake, it just means a coiled one. But some people personalize it as a snake. In traditional Hindu mythology, Kundalini is sometimes referred to as a goddess, a fierce and powerful energy that works according to her own sense of timing and the evolutionary needs of the situation. Her movement through the body can be thunderous, destroying whatever energetic attachment is obstructing her free flow. So this energy, when it arises, it destroys impurities. Indeed, I did not even know anyone who engaged in such esoteric pursuits. As a university professor of English and women's studies, I had lived primarily in my head with virtually no awareness of the inner energies and the life of the spirit they engaged. So this university professor had nothing to do with Hinduism, and Kundalini awakened with her, and this I found throughout the books, normal occurrence that people who have no connections with Hinduism, they still experience awakening when they have near-death experience, childbirth, sometimes when they are going through some critical illness, when they get the taste of almost reaching that state of death, something is shaken in them, and Kundalini awakens, or when they are ready, when they are seeking spiritually, Kundalini awakens even though they don't know anything about Hinduism and may be following different paths. Those most informed on the subject hold Kundalini to be the bioelectrical energy of the physical body and the creative energy of the universe as a whole. That's how I perceive it to be as well. It's just energy of the body. It's not some external energy. It was always within you, but when you're mature enough, then it awakens. For most people, this energy typically operates by itself, well below the threshold of consciousness. So some of that energy in all individuals sustains life and makes organs work. But for those who are awakened, that energy works full force. It's the elemental life force what keeps us going for as long as we are alive. Generally, it is believed that pain results when there are blockages, that is, constrictions in mind, body, emotions, or psyche. People with major unresolved psychological issues, as well as those with serious physical challenges, may be especially at risk. As the Kundalini works through the system, it flushes out these hidden blockages and presses on until they're cleared. So this energy keeps working in you until it clears all the blockages in your system. It is almost as if the Kundalini has an intelligence of its own. It does have intelligence of its own as it presses forward. Its promptings may be strong or weak at various times, but it generally continues until the task is completed, which is total transformation of you. Body, mind, soul. You are born again completely. In ancient India, yogis prepared for years for the ultimate experience of enlightenment, and New Age deceives us into thinking that this process, you can just, force it to happen and everything will be okay, when in the past, yogis prepared for this experience for years. And keep in mind that at that time, the air was not polluted, they did not live in toxic environments, people were not as mentally diseased as they are now, and still they took years to prepare for this. So if it awakens in an average city dweller, it's a disaster. They are totally unprepared. So continuing the quote, they followed strict ascetic disciplines, ate a carefully controlled diet, performed obscure rituals of cleansing and purification, and mastered extreme yogic techniques to be able to withstand the awakened energy. Anyone beginning a journey must first possess the desire for such an undertaking. The Sufis call this initial stage yearning. Spiritual yearning is indeed the sign of the serious student, one who acknowledges that something is lacking in her or his life and wishes to discover what this may be. The desire may not be pointed directly toward Kundalini arousal as such. Nonetheless, it is an important step in the overall process of Kundalini, if Kundalini is to be more than a fleeting bodily sensation. So first, what's required to awaken Kundalini's desire for spiritual progress. We are in a very literal sense reborn when Kundalini awakens, made new, and we emerge from our encounter wearing new garments in which to greet the world. At last our being is complete. Finally we know who we are. But this doesn't happen instantly, as New Agers put. When this crown chakra opens, when the awakening happens, it might take years of that transformation. Doesn't instantly happen. It might take years. Many have noted that when the suffering becomes too intense, at the moment when they think that they can bear no further stress, the Kundalini begotten pressures will withdraw and allow a period of rest before the next challenge appears, as it is as if the Kundalini is conscious of our limits and knows when to back away and when to resume. So basically, when this Kundalini purification starts, it will be, many people describe it as sessions, and I completely agree with that. So you're going through purification and you may start swinging if there is some kind of impurity in you, to cleanse it. And sometimes it can be really tiring, because you may be able to you may have to go through different rhythmic movements and so forth. And when you get tired, that energy as though knows that it's enough for you, and so the session finishes, and this continues every day until the nerves are cleansed completely, all the blockages are dissolved. And when this purification process is happening, also sins are brought to light, so you may become aware of something that you were doing that's wrong, so that you no longer engage in that. Also, many now realize that the diet needs adjustment, that harmful habits of excess of various kinds, such as addictions, unresolved conflicts, and other destructive patterns of behavior, all need to be confronted. So bit by bit you will be shown what adjustments you need to make in your life, so that you no longer abuse yourself. For the latent issues will come up and demand to be dealt with, and emotions may run strong. It has often been noted that meditation itself can bring into consciousness painful past issues still awaiting attention, much to the surprise of those expectant to enter unbroken bliss in the new state. It's true. Likewise, Kundalini acts as a teacher to the soul, pointing out in unmistakable ways those areas needing to be healed. So I like this paragraph because it says that unlike New Agers who think that when you open crown chakra you will be enlightened, there is just it's a major achievement, but then the transformation process continues, and you need to deal with all the negative aspects of your character and everything that's negative in your life. You just need to change it so that you don't hinder this transformation process. You will need to change a lot of things. Although the initial awakening may have been preceded by a time of grief and despair, Underhill asserts that the most trying dark night of the soul comes at a later stage. So at first, even that awakening can be really frightening, but later it will be the real dark night of the soul arrives. After the bliss, after the many convolutions and returns, there is suddenly a seeming withdrawal of divine favor, because when Kundalini is awakened, you feel protected and you know that you're not alone, and it is the kingdom within. You always feel that undercurrent of bliss and happiness. It's always there. Sometimes you may be taken out of that if something terrible happens in your life, but you always know it's there, and you just center yourself back, and you're again in the kingdom of heaven within. But it's told that after the bliss, after the many convolutions and returns, there is suddenly a seeming withdrawal of divine favor. Bliss, which may have become a regular feature of one's life, suddenly departs, and one is left to ponder what has gone wrong. For the Christian disciple, the feeling is often one of profound despair, as if God has simply turned his face away from an unworthy subject. And of course, and for those on the Kundalini path, the effect is much the same. The Christian saint thrown into the abyss of despair must make final surrender, acknowledge and repent all sins and weakness, and allow herself to be guided by the divine authority into favor once more. The lesson is much the same for the Kundalini novice. We discover again that the journey is not under our control, that it is directed by some still mysterious force, seeming both within and outside the self. We must release all attempts to guide or force a return to the earlier state, and simply stand still and wait in patience and humility for the renewal of connection. And also this applies to the purification process. You cannot control it. You need to really trust this energy of the universe, totally surrender, and then you will much quicker go through the purification process rather than delaying it or blocking it. And I blocked it for a year because I was afraid. I thought it's demonic energy. It's not. But if you block it, it's not going to overpower you. You can always start it, but it's better not to do it, because then you will quickly go through that process. Better not to block it, just surrender to it. Then you will go quickly through that purification process and you will be transformed. The honeymoon is now over, and we must deal with some very urgent issues before we are ready to go forward to the next stage. So this is describing the after bliss comes the dark night of the soul. What we have experienced thus far is a massive leap into another level of existence. That part was easy. Now the real work begins. And then in the midst of our struggle, the blissful energies return and all is in harmony once more. We know we are on the right course. We are in alignment with Source, and so move ahead. Even now, though we make discernible progress, we suffer setbacks and returns, shifts and oscillations. As we continue our struggle on this uneven and unpredictable path, the rewards are many, but the cost may be extreme. What you don't get told in many gurus don't tell you this, most gurus, because they don't have that awakening. They don't know. At the same time, deep spiritual transformation is itself a universal human experience, one with a very long history across time and space. Whether it's the journey of the Christian mystic into divine union or the Sufi seeker yearning for the beloved, the story of the soul's encounter with inner reality carries certain features common to a great many traditions and lineages. Kundalini operates as the basis for all such entries into transcendence, and it will emerge into consciousness for many on the path, whatever their orientation, for it is the vibration of the ultimate mystery that constantly calls us to awakening. Underhill and others have discussed there are also certain recurrent motives or themes that seem to run through many personal accounts of spontaneous inner transformation. That is, the feeling that we are now a new being. When you go through this experience, you know you're born again, but people will not recognize anything different about you physically. Unless they have a spiritual side, they might see that you're now a bright being, but if they don't have that side, you will know that you're born again, but they may not notice any change in you. We appear to be the old self, but are in fact a new self in disguise. The feeling that we have been granted a gift we have not earned. We ask how this could happen to me of all the people. The difficulty of expressing such ineffable experience in words, deep hesitation over sharing such intimate and unfamiliar experience with others. How could anyone else possibly understand? In the East, this is called the way of the Bodhisattva, one who forgoes personal enlightenment to help others as they progress. So this is told in reference to those who people who experience this awakening. They have to use this energy to uplift the world. rather than retreat and enjoy this energy and this expanded perception and spiritual gifts themselves. Because I also believe that we have gone through this transformation not only for our personal benefits, but to uplift the world. Consequently, the developmental tasks of Kundalini in the center are those of deconstruction of the false self and explication of the true self. According to my observations, this deconstruction process as a stage of spiritual development can last for up to several years if the Kundalini energy continues its motion upwards. In the case of a stuck process, deconstruction turns into depression, which can stay for life. So when this is happening, it's best not to resist. And deconstruction process can be scary. I haven't yet gone through it myself, so this again is not an exactly right way of putting it, because even the Kundalini can go up and you're to the crown and then come back and do that process. It depends on each individual, but I think that everyone will have to go through that deconstruction process, because we are, from the moment we are born in a totally unnatural civilization, and we are ruined individuals already because of the way that our culture works, false beliefs that we are instilled, false education, toxic food and so forth. We're completely broken. So this deconstruction state, basically that energy, the energy of nature, takes you apart so that you are put back in the right way. And some people, when they meditate, they even feel that their hands and their head and everything is detached from the body and then put back together. So you can go through this process in a different way, but I think everyone has to go through that deconstruction process, and it indeed can be scary. Or being sucked into the abyss, some people experience that. I think that actually all people would have to experience that. And I remember before being born again, I experienced that abyss, but I was afraid. I did not let go. But if I'm now resuming my spiritual activities, and if again that experience of abyss happens, I will try to let go. But it's extremely scary. It's the most scary thing that can happen to you when you experience that abyss. Some people will not know what I'm talking about. Some people know exactly what I'm talking about. And those people who actually let go, they emerge new beings, completely transformed. So this is a good experience, but it's like you conquer death. And this is the most scary experience. Basically, you're dying in this world. You are letting go of everything, but then you emerge completely transformed. So this is an amazing experience, but very frightening. The key event during leukemia, which I believe was instrumental to my friend's recovery, was that he managed to stop his mind. He attained the condition of no mind while reading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. It cut through the maze of negative thoughts that were in fact existential obscurations of nature of his own beings. After reality emerged from this obscurity, my friend experienced a potent episode of Kundalini. Energy rushed through his entire body, and he became telepathic and able to perceive subtle energies. So I'm quoting this because this shows that Kundalini can awaken without you touching yoga in any way, but this person experienced Kundalini awakening simply by being present, by staying in the now, by being fully aware without thinking. And this process of awakening started. So how can people see that Kundalini is demonic or that it's invited through yoga only, when this person awakened simply by being present? Or when during childbirth Kundalini awakens. Again, it's nothing to do with Hinduism, but Hinduism documented this experience. That's why it's associated with Hinduism, but it's not connected to any religion. The task at this stage was rooted in looking at his deepest convictions and regulating his relationship with certain parts of himself. So when Kundalini is awakened in you, it will bring to light beliefs that were unquestioned, that were accepted only as reality, but then you realize that they are not true. So this is again part of that cleansing process when you are transformed into the being that you're supposed to be, and all the false beliefs are now have to be dealt with at some time, at some stage of that process. The latter took several years and culminated in bringing to consciousness and re-educating the earliest parts of self. While he matured to a greater understanding of himself, he was not able to let go of his efforts to control many areas of his life, which contradicted his spiritual insight. So when this happens, you're sometimes really challenged, and sometimes you do not want to acknowledge that you were wrong. If your whole life is built on a certain belief, and so you are then presented with with the choice whether to stick to those beliefs that you know now that they are false, or whether to let go, and this would result in total transformation of your life, and maybe even some really negative things will happen to you, like maybe you will have to lose some friends, for example, but at the end it will be worth it because you won't be living a lie anymore. It might also be the case that a negative Kundalini awakening experience may be very difficult for an individual to recover from because of the potentially long-term effects on the brain itself. So when people don't adequately prepare, or when they force this awakening through drugs, brain damage can be great, and some people never recover. That's why it's very important to prepare thoroughly for this awakening. When novices who don't have the proper education or guidance begin to naively and carelessly engage mystical experiences, they're playing with fire. Danger exists on the physical and psychological levels, as well as on the level of one's continued spiritual development. Whereas spiritual masters have been warning their disciples for thousands of years about the dangers of playing with mystical states, the contemporary spiritual scene is like a candy store where any casual spiritual tourist can sample the goodies that promise a variety of mystical highs. That's the New Age movement, telling about all the amazing transcendental states without mentioning dangers in any way. Stanislav and Christina Grof coined the term spiritual emergency and founded the Spiritual Emergency Network in 1980 to support individuals experiencing psychological difficulties associated with spiritual practices and spontaneous spiritual experiences. CEN provides information and makes referrals to therapists for such problems. When interviewed in 1995, Stanislav Grof noted this from his experience with CEN. There exist spontaneous, non-ordinary states that would in the West be seen and treated as psychosis, treated mostly by suppressive medication. But if we use the observations from the study of non-ordinary states and also from other spiritual traditions, they should really be treated as crisis of transformation or crisis of spiritual opening, something that should really be supported rather than suppressed. If properly understood and properly supported, they are actually conducive to healing and transformation. So most Westerners totally misinterpret Kundalini symptoms, Kundalini effects, and they think this to be mental imbalance when actually a person is totally changed. And if it's left without drugs, but the person just goes through this, the individual that emerges is born again, a new being. But unfortunately in the West, if this awakening happens in the West and the individual doesn't know anything what's happening to him, he might be institutionalized. The Spiritual Emergence Network newsletter reported in 1988 that 24% of its hotline calls concerned Kundalini awakening experience. In Kundalini awakening, there is typically a surge of energies along the spine and throughout the body that can overwhelm and incapacitate the ego and leave a person adrift in a sea of profound consciousness changes at every level, physical, emotional, and mental. Kundalini awakening most commonly occurs as an unintentional side effect of yoga, meditation, qigong, or other intensive spiritual practices. Some also consider psychotherapy, giving birth, unrequited love, celibacy, deep sorrow, high fever, and drug intoxication to be the triggers. Others believe Kundalini awakening can occur spontaneously without apparent cause, but I believe there is a cause, which is that the person is spiritually mature enough to handle this awakening. If the person had presented me with a description of an awakening experience, if he did exercises such as meditation, yoga, or a martial art regularly, or if he experienced strong meditative states where he went beyond concentration into stillness or a sense of unity, then I would be more likely to consider it Kundalini. And now here are some symptoms of Kundalini. Prana is the Hindu word for vital energy, and as intense energy moves through the body and clears out psychological blocks. Some people experience intense involuntary jerking movements of the body, including shaking, vibration, spasm, or contraction. Some people find themselves performing yogic postures or hand mudra gestures. This happened to me and it totally frightened me. Both of my hands lifted up and started doing mudras, and I thought that I'm demon possessed. But actually this was a normal Kundalini awakening process when it's moving through you and it's doing harmonious signs with hands. It's connected with creation, how the world is created, and I totally misunderstood it. I got so frightened when this happened, and it's actually a normal thing that happens, and it's called yogic phenomena. It's just a normal thing that happens to you during this awakening. So you do hand mudra gestures that you never learned or could not do in a normal state of consciousness. Unusual breathing patterns may appear with either very rapid or slow, shallow breathing. Kundalini awakening often generates unusual psychological activity, which can present as heart, spinal, gastrointestinal, or neurological problems, internal sensations of burning, hypersensitivity to sensory input, hyperactivity or lethargy, great variations in sexual desire, and even spontaneous orgasm have been reported. Emotions can swing from feelings of anxiety, guilt, and depression with bouts of uncontrollable weeping to compassion, love, and joy, and this is all to cleanse your subconscious mind. Some people experience visions of light, symbols, or spiritual entities. Auditory sensations may include hearing voices, music, very usual, inner sounds or mantras. There may also be a disruption of the proprioceptive system with loss of sense of self as a body or an out-of-body experience. A person may experience precognition, telepathy, psychokinesis, awareness of auras, and healing abilities. Some people may shift into altered state of consciousness in which they directly perceive the unity underlying the world of separation and experience a deep peace and serenity. Also, Kundalini rose in one person listed here, described here, after emotional release work. Diet, energy work, modifying her meditation practice, grounding exercises, deep therapeutic work on the emotional issues activated by the rising Kundalini energies, journal writing, and mobilizing her support system were some of the things that helped in her process. So these are all the activities that might help you when Kundalini is rising to deal with these new energies. This is why balance, taking care of ourselves, being in nature, and regular physical exercise all help. As with yoga, qigong, especially when practiced alone and unsupervised and to extremes, can trigger a Kundalini awakening crisis. And most of these crises resolve after the practice is terminated. So most people, they experience awakening when they really focus on their spiritual practices. I had to move because it's getting dark, so you probably don't have the clear picture. So if you're not ready to deal with this, then you can stop, but it's better to stop as soon as you feel that something strange is going on. And then if you don't want this to continue, if you're not ready for this awakening, just stop all spiritual practices and then probably and ground yourself, and probably this process will be delayed. When Asian meditative practices are transplanted into Western contexts, the same problems can occur. And I'm reading this so that people are aware that the yogic practices and meditation practices that came from the East, they were designed thousands of years ago in the conditions that were totally different from our Western civilization. They lived in pure, they breathed pure air, they had pure water, they lived totally naturally. And when this is transported to the West, these practices, they don't meet the requirements that we have. Our situation is totally different, and that's why so many complications arise when Kundalini is awakening in us. Treatment involves discontinuation of the spiritual practice, at least temporarily when something goes wrong, and engaging in alternative grounding activities like eating heavier food and being outside a lot. Like so many other Westerners, I did not know about it and didn't ask for so yet. Again, an account of Kundalini awakening of a Westerner who had nothing to do with Hinduism, and this energy awoke in him, proving that Kundalini is not only Hindu phenomena. Phenomena associated with Kundalini process are occurring with increasing frequency among Westerners who have never heard of it before, and like those who have near-death experiences, they have done nothing intentionally to arouse it. Over the years, as a public speaker addressing hospices, hospital staffs, universities, churches, support groups, and media interviews, I have heard of other spontaneous triggers of Kundalini rising besides the NDE. Audience participants have told me about their experiences in childbirth, meditation, intense prayer can awaken Kundalini, experiencing the death of a loved one, withdrawal from chemical dependence. When you start leading completely natural life, again, this can trigger Kundalini arousal. Bottoming out from an overwhelming loss, alien encounters, including angels and other beings, intense transcendent sexual experiences, being in nature, reading spiritual literature, or hearing a spiritual talk may trigger Kundalini. But the reason most Kundalini experiences happen when people start engaging in yoga and meditation is because these practices are directed at awakening that energy, whilst other practices may not be directed specifically at awakening that energy. Once we have a spiritual awakening and move into the Kundalini process, our unconscious material from our inner life tends to come into our conscious awareness in powerful ways. This is very important. When you start awakening Kundalini, you will have to deal with what's in your subconscious. So you might see frightening images and people think it's demons, but these are just frightening thought forms you yourself created and suppressed. And if you don't face them, if you don't acknowledge them, if you block them, you will not resolve those issues. But if you face them, so unconscious content will come to the surface when the Kundalini is rising, and when you face these things and accept that they are there, which is true, they are there, we should not deny it, despite of what New Age teaches. When you face those things, they dissolve, and the energy is freed for fixing your body and just making you more alive. So this is very important, that energy. We have a lot of it suppressed in the subconscious in the form of frightening images and thoughts, but when we face those things, we release that energy from captivity. And also what happens is that we become one. We are now divided because we don't even know what's happening in our subconscious. But when we face all the negativities in our subconscious minds and we merge these two minds, conscious and subconscious, then we become one, united. And Yeshua told in, I think, the Gospel of Thomas, that if you become one, that's when you enter the kingdom of heaven, when you become united within yourself. Divided against yourself is a recipe for destruction, because a house divided against itself cannot stand, as Yeshua said. These include, with this new awareness come new choices. These include being able to choose whom we care to be around. Before awakening to this process, we might have been able to numb out when in the company of toxic people, and now the signs of another's toxicity are collecting, and part of becoming psychologically and emotionally healthy is to learn to protect ourselves instead of numbing out. So when you are when Kundalini is active in you, you feel the people that are bad for you, the people that are harmful to you, and you choose not to be around them because you physically feel ill around such people. As we heal and proceed along our spiritual journey, which may be directed by what has been named Kundalini in the East, we can release our past emotional and psychological wounds and replace them with positive feelings and a clear mind. As we work through our Kundalini process and find balance, so much more comes with it than we could ever have predicted. As our physical beings and our souls become one, our journey and destination become one. All our striving to become who God meant us to become comes to fruition. We realize that we are one. Even the belief in heaven after this lifetime recedes as we experience creating heaven here. We remember who we are, and we are home. Again, this may realization may not happen instantly, but may come after years after the awakening. But growing up in a dysfunctional family and a dysfunctional society, we may have become wounded. That wounding made our child within, or true self, go into hiding, and the only one left to run the show of our life was our ego. And since it's not competent to run our life successfully, we often end up feeling confused and hurt. There are some traps in spiritual awakening. After we have had our particular spiritual experience and possible Kundalini arousal, one trap is being misled by other people who may try to steer us off our personal path. So there are many people, who will try to label this awakening as being psychotic or work of the devil or hallucinations, and they may try to invalidate our experience in some other way. This can lead to the second trap. They may try to prescribe or even force us to take toxic psychiatric drugs, from sedatives to antidepressants to major tranquilizers to mood stabilizers. In the most extreme cases, they might lock us up or shame and guilt us in other ways. And this may stop the transformation process. Very dangerous. Medications is the worst thing that you can do, taking medications when this happens to you. When we allow our Kundalini process to evolve naturally, the result is usually psychological and spiritual growth over time. A problem is that many of the associated symptoms and experiences mimic what psychiatry and psychology call mental disorders or mental illness. Today, most psychiatrists and some psychologists, social workers and counselors are unable to recognize Kundalini and instead prescribe or recommend one or more psychiatric drugs in an attempt to lessen the patient's symptoms. In Kundalini awakenings, we become progressively more connected with self, others, and God, but these psychiatric drugs are toxic to the brain and body and tend to shut down or aggravate the normal flow of the Kundalini process. The drugs slam shut the door to our psycho-spiritual growth. Bregin's work has reflected the sometimes missing conscience of psychiatry. If you accept help in the form of psychiatric drugs, realize that you're entering an area that you may regret or be unable to stop. Each drug has toxic effects that turn out to be at least as bad as the original complaint, and such drugs often lead to more drugs to counter these toxic effects, which include drug withdrawal. In his groundbreaking book Kundalini, Psychosis or Transcendence, Lee Sanella, MD, writes, "There are many undergoing this process who at times feel quite insane. When they behave well and keep silent, they may avoid being called schizophrenic or being hospitalized or sedated. Nevertheless, their isolation and sense of separation from others may cause them such suffering. We must reach such people, their families, and society with information to help them recognize their condition as a blessing and not a curse. Certainly, we must no longer subject people who might be in the midst of this rebirth process to drugs or shock therapies, approaches which are at opposite poles to creative self-development. And I strongly believe that the powers that control us know exactly what's happening, that they created the medical system in this way, these institutions, so that doctors are straight away prescribing medicines for people who experience some kind of changes in their minds, that those people who would be the lights of the world, that they are suppressed and institutionalized, that they are taken away from the society so that they cannot influence it for the better. During stages 0 and 1, clinicians who don't understand or are not educated about Kundalini arousal may want to prescribe psychoactive drugs. This will usually have a detrimental effect that has the potential to abort the transformational process. These drugs may give some relief for a short time, but will soon numb the person out and numb them down like a chemical straitjacket. Even worse, they can cause anxiety, depression, or psychotic symptoms for those who are in a delicate phase of their process. Spiritual practices and awakenings can revive and exacerbate unresolved conflicts. This is not necessarily bad. It's not bad at all. It's important to solve all unresolved conflicts, and when you are experiencing this awakening, all the unresolved conflicts will come into the surface and you will have to deal with them. And so when you deal with them, this result should be in considerable healing and personal integration. You become more integrated being when you are not afraid to face all the darkness and unresolved conflicts that are within. You must face everything that's within you that has been suppressed if you want to integrate your entire personality. You don't deny anything that's in you that you created, but you accept everything. You face those things, and so they get integrated. Those structures are released in the form of energy, and it benefits you. You become whole. Kundalini was described as a normally dormant mechanism or organizing principle that could become activated or aroused under certain conditions to strengthen and purify individual's prana, transforming its energies upon the individual. Comparable potential forces or organizing principles have also been described in other traditions. Examples are Shakti, the Odic force, the Holy Spirit, the pearl of great price, the serpent power, the rod of Aaron, the sacred fire, Osiris, and the sun behind the sun. However, the same ancient Eastern traditions have also recognized that when the brain is deprived of oxygen, Kundalini as the life force in rare circumstances may actually rush to the brain in an effort to sustain life, which again proves that Kundalini is the force of life. It's not a demon. It tries to save a person. This theoretical arousal of Kundalini by life-threatening crisis has traditionally been regarded by most Eastern philosophers as dangerous. If awakened without proper guidance, as social psychologist Kenneth Ring believes happens in near-death experiences, it's also hard to recognize the energy's presence because it manifests itself in so many different patterns. Because its symptoms mimic so many disorders of the mind and body, even people familiar with the Kundalini concept are unsure whether they are witnessing rising Kundalini energy or disorders of the mind and body. However, taking psychotropic medications to elevate symptoms on the assumption that these represent a psychiatric disorder may disrupt the natural healing mechanism of Kundalini activation. So this energy is wise, is the energy of universe, is the energy of nature. It knows what it's doing. We should not interfere with it at all. The less we interfere with it, the quicker it will do its job in transforming us. And it's also usual that when this purification process happens, body gets locked into different positions. Usually they're yogic positions that the person probably never did in his life. Also, you may experience audio-visual symptoms such as internal lights or colors that light up the body, internal voices and internal whistling, hissing, or roaring noises, and psychological symptoms such as sudden bliss or ecstasy for no reason, speeding or slowing of thoughts, and expanding beyond the body and watching the body from a distance. Also of note, among 153 near-death experiencers, there was a significant positive correlation between NDE, scale score, and number of physio-Kundalini symptoms reported. That is, those with deeper NDEs reported more physio-Kundalini symptoms. So Kundalini is related to near-death experience. Given that the increasing frequency of near-death experiencers was estimated by Gallup poll more than a quarter century ago to be 5% of the adult American population, the study suggests that the physio-Kundalini syndrome may be far more common in Western society than previously imagined. So people report nearly identical experiences during NDE than what happens when Kundalini rises. But since they're not familiar with Hindu literature, they have no idea that it's Kundalini. So they report like feeling energy rushing to their heads and seeing colors and experiencing extraordinary events that people cannot witness with the natural perception does not allow this to happen. But the Kundalini is not in their dictionary, so they don't know that it's that. Contrary to one popular myth, Kundalini is not some exotic energy that shoots up your spine without warning. It's a natural flow of energy inherent in each person, part of the subtle structure of each human being. It is at home and flowing through your nervous system right now, even as you read this. But the most of it is not awakened. We have all seen the ancient symbol used to represent the modern Western medical profession. Through Eastern eyes, the two serpents intertwined on a staff represent the rise of Kundalini energy through the two nerve centers, the Ida and the Pingala. The central channel, the staff, is the Sushumna. It raises the question, was it known or intended that the symbol of modern medicine signifies these three channels of ancient healing? So when this Kundalini rises up your spine and goes into the brain, it cleanses you. Firstly, it cleanses you. It takes you apart, and then puts you back in the right way, and it heals you. And this is the symbol of the medical profession. These three channels are called nadis, the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. The Ida channel is experienced via the breath through the left nostril. Breathing through the left nostril relates to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's calming, cooling, and restorative, and assists with elimination. So when people are agitated, those who know Hindu practices, they start breathing through the left nostril. They close the right nostril and they breathe through left nostril, and then they calm down. The Pingala channel is experienced by breathing through the right nostril. This relates to the sympathetic nervous system. It's energizing and warming and allows assimilation. So people who have difficulty digesting, sometimes they breathe through the right nostril after eating, so that this fiery energy would help them to digest the food quicker. And when Kundalini sometimes rises not through the middle channel, Sushumna, but sometimes, like it happened in the case of Gopi Krishna, it actually gets into the fiery channel and it rises through it into the brain, and then people can even die because you feel like you're burning, and this is very, very dangerous. So Gopi Krishna almost died, but he survived at the last days of his life, I guess. Hence, the being consciousness bliss of one's formless self is distorted and constricted, and under the tyranny appears in the restricted forms known as the chakras. It's for this reason that the chakras are properly referred to by the terms of knots and contraction. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we read, in acquiring the traditional doctrine, there is release from all knots. So Kundalini rises through all the knots, through all the chakras. These are the energy concentrations in the body, the nerve concentrations, and they must be resolved for the Kundalini to rise into the crown. And when they get resolved, then every time Kundalini works to resolve those, unbind those knots, you will have to go through different situations in your life that keep those knots in place. So it's not only spiritual cleansing, but you have to also deal with those problems in order for those knots to be undone. Liberation, in short, is not the actual untying of these knots, but the silent admission that they're already untied. I disagree with this. This is one of the PhDs telling that, but I think those knots are real. Like when I was before my Kundalini rising to the brain, I saw the chakras, and I saw the chakra spinning in one direction, and then it changed the direction of spinning, and this is one of the signs that is being undone. This is a very good sign. All of them will have to change their spinning direction. Kundalini Yoga therefore wisely proceeds to reverse this tyranny of awareness and bliss, step by careful step, untying the knots in what it sees as roughly the reverse of the order in which they were tied, until finally the chakras themselves lie dissolved, that is fully opened, and transcendent bliss is returned to its prior and unobstructed condition, a condition essentially similar to the polymorphous freedom of the infant, but now transmitted through a matured and fully developed personality. The aim of Kundalini Yoga, therefore, is to free transcendent bliss from its dilutions, and restrictions, and to recognize it as boundless, oceanic, without limits in time or space. Each dissolving of knot, each opening of a chakra represents and actually feels like a return of transcendent bliss to a more oceanic, unobstructed state. Variations in the size of the energy stream determine the intellectual and aesthetic development of an individual, with geniuses having a comparatively larger volume of bioplasma streaming into the brain. So genius, people who have extraordinary mental capacities, Kundalini is responsible for that. They just receive greater flow of that energy into the brain. The wide variation in types of genius depends on the particular region of the brain that is irrigated and developed by that energy. Thus, through certain occult techniques, and occult doesn't mean evil, occult means hidden. So, occult knowledge, which is hidden knowledge, can be used for the good or for evil. So, this word doesn't mean evil. Thus, through certain occult techniques and spiritual disciplines, an individual of normal intelligence can accelerate the evolutionary process to attain the stature of an intellectual prodigy and beyond to genius. This concept directly challenges current notions that intelligence is basically determined at birth by one's genes. This is not correct. Anyone can gain greater intelligence by awakening that force within, and it travels to the brain and it awakens the dormant brain centers. During the Kundalini process, the entire nervous system undergoes a microbiological change and is transformed, especially the brain. The result of a fully awakened and developed Kundalini is both perceptible changes in the organism and a new state of consciousness, the cosmic consciousness of mystics and enlightened seers. This individual awareness of unity with God, Gopi Krishna says, is the core experience behind all the world's major religions and is the goal of all true spiritual and occult practices. Humanity has an innate hunger for this state of paranormal perception. Moreover, bountiful nature has provided the means of achieving it. Kundalini, the biological basis of religion and genius. This is the secret behind yoga and all other spiritual disciplines, esoteric psychologies, hermetic philosophies, and genuine occult mysteries. It's also the key to genius, psychic power, artistic talent, scientific and intellectual creativity with good health. Local gurus and holy men were unable to give Gopi Krishna any relief or understanding, so he undertook a reading program through the literature of religion, psychology, and occultism. He found that Kundalini was recognized at least 5,000 years ago, but was always closely guarded secret, recorded in veiled language and allusion that made little sense to someone who had no personal experience of it. So when Gopi Krishna experienced Kundalini awakening, he went to different sages, gurus of India, and nobody was able to help because they talk about Kundalini, but they actually never experienced that awakening. So most gurus, they pretend to be spiritual, born again, but they are not. They wear those long robes and they have these disciples, but many of them, their power is not this power that you get after transformation, but their power comes through magic, and they're black magicians. They enslave people's souls. They're very dangerous individuals, cheating people, just wanting to receive their money and worship power, worship energy. But they themselves are totally unregenerated. They are still fallen men. So Gopi Krishna realized that India has lots of writings about Kundalini, but it no longer has people who actually have awakened Kundalini, or there are very few. So he was unable to get help from any individual. He had to go through this terrible process because himself and his Kundalini was awakened in a wrong way. That's why he experienced pure horror, but about this I will read in another book. Greek myths told us that to see a god as it was would kill you, and in Old Testament we also find that people said, some individuals said that I saw God face to face and I did not die. After Kundalini awakening, if you survive, and then you can also say that you saw God face to face and you did not die. The ordinary mind and body have to be trained and transformed to withstand that vision and influx of divine power. Kundalini is classically viewed as having two aspects. One maintains the entire existence of our body, mind, and spirit. The other aspect, considered dormant, is the power of consciousness to know the divine in its infinitude as self. Many people have visions and experiences of this archetypal form of Kundalini in meditation and dreams as the process of Kundalini awakening and unfolding occurs. Given what we know about a microscopic bit of coil-bound energy containing all the information necessary to make a human being, otherwise known as DNA, Perhaps we shouldn't be too skeptical about a form of bound consciousness lying dormant within, symbolized as a coiled serpent waiting to propel your awareness back to union with the Creator. So some people identify Kundalini as a giant DNA strand that is inactive. Like our brains, most of 90% of our brains or more than that is inactive. And that DNA strand wrapped around your spine is also inactive until you awaken it. First, the Kundalini moves through the Sushumna Nadi, erasing, if you will, the impressions stored there and releasing the energy bound up in them. This extraordinary purification process then releases us from the patterns in our lives created by those impressions. You are no longer the same person when this happens. It erases useless habits and the way that you lived. It no longer seems good for you to live in the same way if it was a harmful way of living. Second, she opens up states of consciousness that gives us access to unbounded awareness. The spiritual side of DNA, Christ's fiery baptism and that of his followers ever since. So he also compares this with receiving of the Holy Spirit. The tongues of fire, that's exactly when Kundalini goes into your head, because Kundalini is the fire. Both the benign and nearly unbearable purificatory powers of the awakened Mother Kundalini. Furthermore, to fit modern values, the inwardly erotic celibacy known as brahmacharya, held for thousands of years to be essential to Kundalini yoga, has been largely dispensed with. So for those who want to awaken this energy, celibacy really helps. The secret of that gigantic intellectuality, spirituality, and superhuman moral force, which we see pulsating in the ancient philosophy, is in the supreme poetry, art, sculpture, and architecture of India, was the all-important discipline of brahmacharya, of celibacy. As subsidiary householders, brahmacharya of one sexual union per month is considered within dharmic rhythms suitable for a moderated practice of Kundalini yoga. So those who have families and they want to arise this force, they are allowed to have sexual intercourse once a month with his other half. The purpose of all branches of yoga is to raise the Kundalini, to raise the dormant power of the being so that he can have excellence. So all those these days who practice yoga, some of them in New Age circles, they have no idea what is the real purpose of yoga, and that's the arising of that power within. Power depends on a story, and self-awareness lets you break the hypnosis of that story. So for protection, the practices were hidden by use of codes and special language or by interlacing them in other writings. So this is told, basically it's told that the ancients hid this science of Kundalini so that it wouldn't be perverted. And that's why when you read Kundalini experiences of ancient mystics, they are veiled, they are told in a way that in symbolic language, so it's very hard to understand, and that's why it's difficult to get to be able to be held by those ancient writings, because they are so veiled in symbolic language. So this is my whole summary of the book. I liked this book, and it's good for those who are interested in the medical side, on the medical research of Kundalini and the opinions of people in medical fields and PhDs about this force. So again, this book is called Kundalini Rising, Exploring the Energy of Awakening by Gurmukh Kaur Khalsa and Shivananda Radha. So I'm going to summarize the other books that I read in other videos. This video is already very long. I hope that this video made you understand more about Kundalini, that it's not only a Hindu phenomena, that this energy is latent in every human being, and those that are prepared for it, those who are spiritually mature, or those, like in ancient writings it says that sometimes Kundalini, this universal energy, just favors some people and arises in some people, and some people make it rise through spiritual practices. And so this is a universal energy. It's not only a Hindu concept. It's present in all of us, and when we are ready, this energy starts rising, purifying us, and then totally transforming us into better beings, better functioning human beings, more spiritual human beings who had the experience of the divine. So that's all I wanted to share with you in this video. Thank you for watching. God bless you.